If you are a creative type, you probably have an unfinished project sitting on some hard drive in your closet, a dusty notebook in the drawer of your desk that just hasn't gotten finished. And you may be asking yourself if you should ever finish that project. Yes, you should. Over the years, in some capacity or other, I've worked with a lot of different artists, musicians, painters, people who draw, who sew, do poetry, a lot of authors. And there's a very common thread amongst all types of creatives, which is that we have this tendency to not want to finish our projects. And I use that word very specifically, that we don't want to finish our projects. I think in painters, this is the easiest place to see this phenomena in action. We see a painting and we're like, hey, what are you working on? And they say, I'm not going to finish that. I don't like where it's going. And it's halfway done. Well, you don't know where it's going yet. It's not done. You don't know from your half-complete project what your complete project will end up looking like. And so you want to give yourself that chance to actually find out what that project is going to be when it's done. For me personally, I think that this story can be told very well through the song A Fistful of Light, which is on my 65th album. The album is titled Incomprehensible Isolation. That album kind of has a very special place in my heart. For my standards, I spent a lot of time on that album. I spent about 2 1/3 years working the production of that album. And I had composed the whole album, all the songs were in place, and I looked at this song, A Fistful of Light, just in its sheet music form, and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna care for this song. And right there, that's where we see so many artists making this mistake of just stopping and saying, this isn't worthy of completion. It's not worth it to me to finish this project. If I had done that with Fistful of Light, it would not have ended up becoming my favorite of all of my songs. I'm gonna put a little disclaimer here that at this point, that is no longer true. I have written another song called Rain Over Nowhere. It is, at the time of this video being published, that song has not yet been released to the public. So only I have heard that song, but I do like it better than Fistful of Light. So Fistful of Light's kind of my second favorite at this point, but it has for several years been my favorite of all of my own works. Judging from where I started, thinking this is just going to be kind of a filler song, I'm not really going to care for it, there's a big jump there. And the way this happened from my perspective is I had completed the composition, put everything into my recording program, got all the instruments in place, started doing the recordings, got everything done, worked the production, and the album was done. And this was in a matter of, a week or two. One of the things I really like to do when I'm working on production is get out of the studio. When I'm up to that point of feeling it's nearing completion or should be complete, go out for a walk, for a jog, do something else, and listen in headphones. Just get out of the studio environment and have kind of a real world listening experience for what's happening with that music. And in this song, Fistful of Light, there are these really nice, kind of lush, intricate strings. And they're interspersed in a few places with some synths and some brass instruments. And of course, all sampled instruments. I didn't have an actual orchestra to work with. That would be lovely. And as I would listen to this, I realized that I didn't really hear the intricacies and the nuance that were in those string sections. It really bothered me because I wanted to hear that. It made me realize that the production didn't have the correct level of clarity that I really needed to have that. And so all the time I'd go out on a run, listen to this album, and be like, still not hearing things correct. So I'd be in the studio tweaking this and tweaking that. I realized at that point that I didn't know what these instruments should actually sound like. Now this almost seems absurd to say I'm working on my 65th album and I don't know what these instruments should sound like. It really struck me in recognizing how little I understood about music production. And in a way, this is not surprising, because doing that many albums as I have, you kind of work to a template because you can. It's my own work. I've got a sound. And so I just, I pull up the tracks I normally use, and I don't really change a lot. So when I'm doing production from week to week on new albums, there's not a lot of impetus to change what you are actually creating, production-wise. It was viable. And I feel like from my second album to my 54th album, the production didn't change very much. It was kind of a slow evolution. And then at my 55th album, I made a pretty significant jump. I started using some different techniques and some different production ideas. And I felt like I started getting better clarity and just overall production at that point. And then with this 65th album, this is when I was like, okay, I really need to learn stuff. And the first thing that I noted was, I don't know what a bass guitar should sound like in this type of production. That was cue number one. And I started listening to multi-track stems where I could solo the bass for a completed piece of work. And I'd be like, wow, like if I would listen to an Iron Maiden production and listen to Steve Harris's bass, I'm like, there is so much more mid-range and high-end in this bass than I thought a bass guitar needed. So that was very eye-opening. And I ended up talking with my friend Jake. We've been close friends ever since we worked in Hades Machine together. It's a punk band that he runs. He had become very good at production on his punk albums. So we talked for a while, and he showed me some tricks to get this much better, more robust sound for a bass. That was cue number one. And just getting that made a significant difference. And then I was able to apply some of those ideas to the drum sound, the guitar sounds, but I had realized, wow, not only do I not know what a bass guitar should sound like, I don't know what a rhythm guitar should sound like. I don't know what a lead guitar should sound like. And what I'm talking about here is what they should sound like on their own so that they can sound right in a mix. There's a common piece of what I will call wisdom, we'll put that in quotes, that floats around in production circles where they say, don't use the solo button on your DAW because you need to make sure your sounds work in the mix. And I think that's really good advice after you have the sound of the instruments actually correct. If you don't know how to get the sound of the instruments correct to begin with, then getting the balance of your work correct and getting the EQ to sit correctly for any given instrument is going to be much more challenging when you don't know what you're actually listening for. And so this was one of the biggest things that I think allowed me to have much more professional sounding production. And on this album, Incomprehensible Isolation, it was the first time that I was really kind of happy with the production. After I worked with Jake, I also got my friend Ray, and we worked on the album a little bit. And Ray just has really good ears, and I know that I can rely on Ray to give me an accurate opinion of what he thinks about something that I'm working on. He's not afraid to say, hey, that doesn't sound good. So that was those two really helped me out a lot. Big appreciation to Jake and Ray, very cool people. And So as I worked on this, and again, I was continually going out for a jog, listening to this, and getting better and better. And the sounds were getting better and better. And I realized, wow, this song, Fistful of Light, this is really cool. As I would be out on these runs, I started to really get an association with this particular song, Fistful of Light, to the point where I ended up putting on a subtitle of the run. So the full title is A Fistful of Light, and parenthetically, The Run, because it just basically became my running song. There was one day I was out, I was gonna run 6 miles, and I had gotten to my turnaround point where I was 3 miles out, and I'd run 3 miles back. And there's a part of this song. Let me back up a little bit. Out where I run, we live out in the desert, and it's stunningly beautiful if you understand anything about the desert life, the plants and the animals inherent to the desert. It's gorgeous out there. I often describe it as, when I'm out on a run, it's like I'm running through a freaking Bob Ross painting. It's amazing. So I'm out on this run, and there's this portion of the song. The song is in C sharp minor, and there's a couple of lighter areas where I modulate into A minor, go back to C sharp minor. And the song's about, I think it's about 11 and a half, 12 minutes long. Toward the end, probably 9 and a half, 10 minutes in, there's this part where I hit it's just a real simple 2-1-7 in C sharp minor. And so coming down to that B note, it kind of gives a feel of being in a B mixolydian mode. So it kind of gravitates slightly toward a different tonal center there. And it feels to me, at that point in the song, kind of like a very victorious kind of a breakdown. And the song, like I said, is great for running, and there's parts of the song where it's like, oh man, this is what it feels like when you're going up a hill, where it's kind of, slowing down a little bit in the song. And that particular part, to me, that's what it feels like when you're running and you get to the top of a hill. It feels like that. It's that victorious feeling of, I'm at the top of the hill. For no other reason than this is the top of the hill. And so I was out on this run. I'm gonna make it a 6 mile run, and I'm looking, and I'm like, this song is on. This song is going in my ears. And I realize if I turn around now, I'm not gonna get to that hill back there to match up with that part of the song. But if I keep going, I think I will. And I just absolutely nailed it. I got up to the top of that hill just as that part was hitting, and it felt so good. It was just, I just love this part of the story. This was basically where I decided I'm going to put on that subtitle of The Run onto this song, because that just felt so good. So I turned that into a 7 mile run that day instead of a 6 mile run. And I headed back home. And great run, great day, and just a part of the story that I really enjoy having in there, because it illustrates how much this really has become one of my favorite songs, and kind of why. The song, in its finished state, really tells the story, from my perspective, of what it feels like to be out on a really enjoyable run. And so if someone were to ask me, why do you like running so much, I would say, listen to Fistful of Light. That's what it feels like when I run. I'm so glad I took all of this extra time to get that album right as a result of that song not sounding right. And coming from where I thought, hey, this is just going to be like a filler song, to that being my favorite song, that was massive for me as a musician. And to this day, like I said, even though Rain Over Nowhere has kind of taken the number one spot for me, really enjoy listening to this album. I think that if you are an athletic type and you like exercising with music, you might want to try out Incomprehensible Isolation. I feel like that's an excellent workout song. It also culminates with the only cover tune I've done on any of my albums to date, which is my heavy metal variations of Three Blind Mice. And that, when I'm out for like a 6-7 mile run and I end on Three Blind Mice, that feels so good. It's freaking awesome. So the point here is this, at where I was when I had composed the song, that's where a lot of people give up. You're partway done and you think this isn't good enough. But I went through and I finished it. And I was like, wow, this is good enough. This is worth putting my time into it. And you're never going to know whether or not it was worth putting your time into it unless you put your time into it. So give yourself that opportunity to see your own work. There's a great quote by John Coltrane. He said that he wished he could come up to his music and listen to it as if for the first time, as if he had no knowledge of what was in that music. And I've actually had an experience of having that happen because I have done an awful lot of music. I was once in Sarah's car. She was driving and her radio was just kind of on random, had a USB stick in it with a bunch of music. And some song came on and I was like, this is really cool. Who is this? And she was like, are you serious? This is you. And I was like, what? And I looked and sure enough, I don't remember what song it was, but it was kind of that experience that Coltrane had talked about wishing he could have, of listening to his music as if he had never heard it. And because I didn't recognize the piece, I'd done a bunch of albums since I had done whatever song that was. I was just listening to it as a piece. I didn't even know that she had any of my music in her car. So it was really fun. And I was like, wow, that's awesome that I feel like that about my own music. And it really is different. And it's unfortunate that Coltrane never had that experience. To my knowledge, he never ended up having that experience because it really is really cool. And it makes me really appreciate just how much it is worth it to finish your own work. So you really should pull that notebook out, whether that's a notebook full of writing or a notebook full of drawings. You should pull out that dusty hard drive. You should get your guitar, put it in your lap. You should slide up to your piano, whatever it is, however you do your art. Get out the paints, get out the pencils, get out the guitar picks, and do your work. And for yourself, even if no one else is ever going to see that or hear that, just out of pure selfishness, finish that work and see how great it is. And even if it's not, even if you end up being right, you say, yeah, I finished this work just like Randy said I should, and it completely sucked. You are still so far ahead of all of the people who refuse to even find out. And another step beyond that is you can say, hey, even though I did this work and I finished it, and that's better than what most artists do, I've also learned from it. And on my next drawing, my next painting, my next story, my next song, I might be able to avoid some of those mistakes. There's nothing wrong with going for quantity over quality. That could be another video that I will probably do at some point. But definitely finish your projects. Do it for yourself. Do it for other people. However, whatever makes you feel like that's what you should be doing. I want you to allow your voice out to do what you want to do create your art. Go get it.